Welcome to Intex. My name's Luke, and in this episode we're going to be covering an Azure Data Engineering project end to end, so all the way from on-prem database to a Power BI dashboard and the pipeline in between. This is episode 2/part 2. In part 1 we covered the initial business request, our solution overview. We then designed this architecture and set all of these services up from the on-prem SQL database on our own computer, Power BI on our own computer, and then the rest of the services here all in Azure. So in Azure we have this resource group with this here. So if you need to set these up, go back and watch that part. Otherwise, let's continue. So the first thing we need to do now that we have everything set up is we need to link the Data Factory to our on-prem SQL database. So if we go to the Data Factory and launch the Studio, this will essentially launch our workspace. I can show you that UI in a minute. But first, before we dive into here, let's open back up SQL Server Management Studio and we'll just connect, so that's all good. Something to be aware of here if you've done the same as me, which is do one bit one day and come back the next. You can open up SQL Server Configuration Manager, and when we open that up here, it'll be this. My son's sleeping next door. He's just a baby. We have our SQL Server here, and you can see it's running. It can sometimes stop, and if it stops, you can just click here to start the service. So we'll come back here, open our databases, and we have these. We'll go to AdventureWorks, we'll open that up, and as we've seen before, the tables, we can just click on one, right click, select, and now we have a query for this table. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a user. So we're going to create a user with a username and password. We're going to store that password into Key Vault, and Data Factory is going to use Key Vault to get the password to access this SQL database to pull the data up. So here we have the create login query, which is create a login called Luke with this password 123456789, and then create that user for the login. So if we ensure we're clicked on the correct one here, we have the SQL open, and up here we can click execute and that will run that there. And here it says Luke already exists, I must have already made them yesterday. We'll call them Luke2 and run execute, and there we go. Commands completed successfully. That will have created this login. If we now go back here to the portal, we've got Data Factory. Up the top, let's search for Key Vault. We'll pop that up. We have our Key Vault, Intech Key Vault. Click in here. Objects, and then keys and secrets. So we want secrets because a key is like, generating an actual key with all this good stuff. We want a secret. So we want to generate an import, but if you notice there, this isn't going to work. So I'll show you. If we do username, as Luke2, we'll just get an instant error. Now the operation is not allowed by RBAC, which is what we were talking about in the previous episode. Role-based access control. So essentially you want to create a role here that has the ability to create keys, and we want to assign it to yourself. So we'll go to IAM, role assignments. There we go, and we can see this is here. I think this is lingering from a previous time when I've done this. So if you click add role assignment, and here we're going to just write in admin, and you can see Key Vault admin. So from blah blah blah, so it lets you do stuff. Click on that, then we'll click next. Now there's members, user, group, or service principal. We are a user. A managed identity would be like a service within Azure. So user, select members, and then you'll pop up. You just select yourself, click select. If you are in a company, there could be loads of users come up there. There could be a variety of groups and service principals. But we have us with that there. Let's review and assign. Review and assign. And then that should be used straight away. Sometimes this kind of duplication thing occurs when it pops out. If you refresh up the top, you see it will go away. So if we go back to objects, secrets, so the secret within our vault, you see that RBAC error no longer exists. and that's because we now have the capability to create secrets. So click create, pop it in here, so we'll write username, and then look to create. You can see it's created that, and then the same again with password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There we go. Apparently that password's been found in a data breach before, which not surprised. So there we go. We now have access. We have made the password. So now let's jump back over to Azure Data Factory. Now from here we want to create a new something, right? That's kind of main thing that pops up is you get a new pipeline, query, data flow, data set. The one which we're concerned about is pipeline. So you can see here within Data Factory you can ingest, orchestrate, transform, and configure some stuff. On the left we've got this panel of icons. If we click expand, home, author, monitor, manage, and learning center. So author is where we can make the things which come up from new. So we've seen it there, pipeline, query, flow, data set. And author, you've got that stuff there. We have a monitor part. You can run a pipeline. That's where you can see, you can monitor the pipeline, and then you can trigger it, etc. A variety of other things. Manage, where you manage linked services, which is essentially a way to link services together, so give them access to one another. And a variety of other things, which I'm not concerned about here. And then also learning center, so where you can get some more tutorials if you want to go deeper into Data Factory. But for us, we'll go to author, go to pipeline, and we'll see there's nothing there. We'll click plus, and you see pipeline, and then pipeline. So this is what I was saying, you can create data sets, data flow, blah blah blah. We're on a pipeline. From here, we'll rename this pipeline. We'll just call it copy. Oh, I've not clicked on it. Call it, what have I done? Copy data. So here within this pipeline you'll see down the left we have things called activities. Now these are just activities that the pipeline will do, things that it will do. And so you can see there's a variety of things like a power query, some machine learning jobs, iteration stuff, so like for each. And then if we come up we can get to things like move and transform as copy data, data flow, and there's a bunch of other stuff, Azure functions, data explorer, Synapse notebooks, etc. Because quite a lot of this stuff like Data Factory and Synapse, I'm sure Synapse is built on top of Data Factory, but we'll come to that later. We can see that. So the first thing we do is we create a new copy data activity, and we'll name this just copy data. We'll just remove the one, and that's fine. So you see here that there's a one on the above source and one above sync. That's saying something needs to be done here. So if we click on source, we can see there's an asterisk here, which is saying a source data set must be selected. Source is the source of your data. So in our example, it's a SQL database. So that's the source. And the sync is where we want it to go, which is the data lake. Source and sync. So we'll have to set these up. So we'll click on new source data set. And within here, you want to search for SQL or SQL, and you see down here SQL Server. The rest of them are a bunch of other things, so different types of SQL servers, and then a bunch of Azure and an Amazon one. We are doing SQL since it's on-prem. Click continue, and we'll name this SQL Server on-prem. So as I had just shown you and briefly talked about, we have linked service coming up now. So on linked service, we want to create a new linked service. And now this is what we're going to use to connect to any other data source. So we'll call it SQL Server on-prem. And then we'll just write linked service afterwards. So the next thing of note here is description. Put in whatever you want if you want a description. You don't particularly need one. But connect via integration runtime. We have here auto resolve integration runtime. This is what we would select if we had services from Azure that we were connecting to. But we actually are connecting to an on-prem database, not one which is already in Azure. So you have to create a different integration runtime. And you can see here, what is the network environment? Is it Azure? Is it self-hosted? Linked self-hosted. And for our example here, we're doing self-hosted. So if we click that, because as you can see, it's on-prem, click continue. And now it's saying, what do you want to name it? And so we'll name it self-hosted integration runtime. SHIR, so self-hosted integration runtime. Click create. And now this pops up, which is saying how we're going to set it up. Because normally when it has that auto resolve, they just link to each other. Whereas here, I'm saying, right, I want to link somewhere. So it's like, right, you need to now install something on your computer so that I can recognize where you are, essentially. And so we have Express or manual. In our instance, we'll just do Express. So click here to launch the Express setup for the computer. And it will download a program here. If we open this up and downloads, double click, and we'll run this. So when that's done, which can take like honestly a good 5 minutes depending on your internet connection, we can then click apply. And there we go, we'll see the big green tick. For there, if you're wondering, mine had an error because I already had this installed and had to uninstall it, which again takes ages. So version recommended, that's fine. Now we want to fill in the server name and database name details. If we come here to SSMS, up the top you'll see desktop blah blah blah, right? If we go to properties, see the name in there, we can copy that. So that's the server name. So then if we go back to the portal, paste that in as server name. The database name, if we go back again to SSMS, where am I going? Database name is AdventureWorks LT 2022. So if we click on that, then click again, we can Control C to get the name, paste that in here, Control V. And we'll use SQL authentication, so that's using the username and password that we had just mentioned. So for the username, we'll put in look2. And for the password, we could put in the password, right? But we don't want it in plain text. We want to leverage the security features which Azure provide, or which they offer. So we click on Key Vault, and then the AVK linked service, we have to make one here. So click New, Subscription, Azure Vault is our vault, System assigned managed identity, that's fine, it's linked service. Click Create. And this will link the service of the Key Vault to the Data Factory. Now, you'll see here that it doesn't load anything up. Now, this is where the Active Directory stuff comes in. So if we go back to our Key Vault here, and we go back to IAM, role assignments, and we want to, let's refresh, we want to add a new role assignment. Now for this one, we want a vault user. So Key Vault secrets user. And click next. And for this here, we're gonna use managed identity. If we click select members, we can then see here, subscription, just the same one as normal. Managed identity, we have Synapse, Data Factory, a couple other things. So for this one, it's Data Factory. And then you can see our Data Factory pops up. So click on that, click select. Basically the linked service has now said from the Data Factory's point of view that we can go to get stuff from Key Vault. But now we have to go to Key Vault and say, by the way, this guy, he's going to come, this is his role. So we'll click select, review and assign, review and assign. And then it'll add that role assignment. When it does, you'll see it in here. Again, duplication, we'll refresh. Looks good. If we go back to the Data Factory now, we can click the refresh button next to secret name. You'll see the error goes away. Click drop down, and username and password pop up. So we can click on password, leave it as the latest version, leave all the other stuff as is. Click create, and there we go. That SQL Server on-prem linked service will be created when publishing. So now it's saying what table name of vids to join. Now we'll refresh that, you can see it's not going to work. There you go, it says can't connect to SQL database. Now, to resolve this, let's go back to the SSMS here. We can close down this properties window. We then right click the server that we're working on. We go to properties. We go to security on this side here. And under server authentication, there'll be Windows and SQL Server and Windows. So you will automatically be on Windows. You have to click SQL Server and Windows so that this username and password can now work. So if we have that assigned, you might have to shut this down and open it back up for it to work. If we go back to the portal, I'll see. So I've just realised I'm trying to debug my own tutorial. I can't find the table name, it's not working, it won't connect. Now this not connecting, it is partly to do with that SSMS, you do have to make that change. But additionally, here we can see it's just not working, it's saying it could be database firewall. What it is it's trying to use HTTPS. So if we go to Azure Key Vault again, because I was trying with the password to see if that was the problem, if the password was wrong, because you can't see it in Key Vault, just tells you it exists, part of the security measures. But under encrypt you can see it says mandatory. You want that to become optional, because as you can see here, its value indicates whether TLS encryption is required, so that's HTTPS. If we now click save, or what we can actually do first is test connection. That means we shouldn't get errors on the next page because of this. So connection successful, it's showing that this will work. If we put that to mandatory, test connection, failed. So that was the problem. Optional, test connection, save. So now we can see that the table name doesn't have an error, but doesn't have any tables. But if we go back to SSMS, you can see there are a bunch of tables. And the reason for this is we have to grant look to access to these tables. And so to do that, we'll just rewrite in here to change this query to say use AdventureWorks 2022 semicolon. We'll do grant select on, and we'll do sales LT dot address to look to. I'm not normally this bad at typing, I'm trying to be quiet because otherwise it makes a racket in the mic. So if we go now to here, click on that, execute, commands completed successfully. I've come back to portal now, refresh the tables, we should see sales LT address pop up. So click on that, click OK. And now the source has been selected. So in here we have the SQL database. Next up we want the sync. So where's it going to go? Obviously we have within this data set here we have what we just created, but we don't want that, we want a new data set for the sync. So for this, if we search data lake, just data, will come up Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, click on that, click continue, and now in here we'll click Parquet, which is a column based format optimized for querying. We'll click continue and we'll just leave it as Parquet sync. Again, we need to create a new linked service from the Data Factory to the Data Lake storage. So we'll just write linked service at the end. Now here we can do auto resolve integration runtime, since this is another service within Azure. Authentication type we can leave as is. Account selection, our subscription, and then our storage account, and then test the linked service, test connection, successful, and create. And there we go. So now you can see it's popped up file path. So this is saying where within that data lake do you want it to go. And this is where the enabling hierarchical naming system comes in, which is what we've done to enable the storage account as a data lake. So we'll click on browse, and here you can see it's everything we have within the or all the containers we have within the data lake. So we'll click bronze because that's where I want it to go. click OK. So it's going to go to bronze, no other secondary directory, and the file name, we can just leave that. Click OK. And now what we can do is we'll grab this, and you can see there's a couple of different buttons. We have validate, so we can validate the debug, add the trigger. We're going to debug first. So this is basically saying, is anything going to go wrong with it? But it also automatically runs it. So we can see here it's queued, it's in progress. And so after about a minute or so, here 44 seconds, we can see that it has succeeded. Now you can see there's a couple of different icons here. So this one, details, gives you some details surrounding it if you're interested in that, but we don't need to know that for this moment in time. And then we have these two icons, which is input and output. So if we click on input, you can see that this is, what's coming in to the pipeline activity. And output is what's coming out of it. Now this is particularly important for if we're going to do, say for instance, a for each. If this copy data was copying the names of tables, for instance, you can then get it from this JSON object. But anyway, it says it's copied the data, so let's go to the storage account and we'll have a look. So if we click on storage accounts, go to Intech and data storage, containers, we'll go to bronze, and voila, just like that, you now have sales LT address .parquet. You can download it. You won't be able to open it unless you have something that can open it, but that's it now here. So what we'll do is we'll actually delete this now because we don't need it, but at least we now have proof of concept that we can get data from the SQL table or SQL database into Azure, into the data lake. So delete that because we don't need it, because the next stage is we're going to update this such that it goes through every table, and then we can bring all the tables directly into that bronze bucket. So what we're going to do next, we're going to create a new pipeline because that's, I suppose, easier for demonstration purposes instead of modifying the existing one. So if we do copy all tables, what we can do is we can just delete that other one, because it won't delete all of the stuff that we made, it would just delete the pipeline itself. And so the first thing we need to do here is we need to get a list of all the tables, because we want to iteratively run that copy data activity for each table. So the first thing we do is, as you'll maybe recall, there's an iterator for each, right? And so that's what we use to do the for each. But first, before that, we need to find the names of the tables. And we want to do this automatically. So if more tables are added, then when this pipeline's run, it updates them and brings them in. So the first thing we're going to do is create a lookup activity. Now this activity is going to look up as it suggests. In the source data set, we're going to do SQL Server on-prem, and then we're going to click open. And under table here, you can see there's a table selected. We want to click clear because we don't want any specific table selected, because we want it to iterate through it. So go back to here now, and use query, we want to click query here, and we'll uncheck first row only. Now within this query, we're going to run a query which is going to get back all the tables within our database. So that query is, so let's expand this so we can see it. So essentially it's selecting the schema name and table name from the tables and schemas where the name is sales LT. Now why sales LT? If we go back to SSMS here, you can see sales LT is the schema here and address is the table name. So for schema sales LT we have address table. For schema sales LT we have product table. And so what we can do now is if we click on that lookup, we can go up to debug, and as we've just seen, this will run it, and there we go. After just 12 seconds it succeeded, and we can see again input output. Input we don't really care about because It's succeeded. Output, you can see here, sales LT address. That's the only one it's brought back. But you can see now how powerful this lookup tool is, because it's come back and said, under schema, I can see address. Now, why is it only brought back one? Well, now if we go back to SSMS, we can see that on AdventureWorks LT, we've granted select access only on sales LT address to look to. Now if we change this to star and run execute, right, so we've just chatted to our trusty pal ChatGPT, because I forgot you can't wildcard on that. And so we're going to grant select on schema. We'll do sales LT to me. So every table in that schema we will now have access. And so if we, whoa, didn't mean that one. Well done. If we now execute this, that's complete. And we go back here, we can click on lookup and we'll debug again. And this time, as you can see, succeeding in 13 seconds. And if we check our output, there are 10 values now. Customer address, blah, 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 blah. And that's because, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that means all 10 tables we have access to, which means it's getting the details for all 10 tables in here. So we now have the tables, let's copy them over. So in activities, let's just write for each, and we'll get that for each here. And now we're going to drag, as you can see here, there's a few things. This, on skip, on success, on fail, on completion. Now if this is successful, this lookup, we then want the for each to work. And so we'll do that green arrow to the next one, so on success. And now within this for each loop, you have activities. And so if we click on edit there, this will open up the same type of UI, except now we're within the for each. And so within the for each, we're wanting to copy data. So for the source data set, we want to use the same as last time, SQL Server on-prem. However, for the query, we don't want the table, we want to actually use a query. And for this query, you can see there's an add dynamic content part, and this is what we want to add, because every for each loop, we want a different table name to be copied over. I'm going to write this expression which says concatenate select from schema.table name. And so as you had seen from that JSON, we'll get the schema name, sales LT, and the table name, address, and this just select from, and it concatenates them together with a dot between them. So it creates that query dynamically. And we'll click OK. And so that's creating that query, which is all good. So for the sync, we're going to use Parquet, just the same one as we made before, except we'll click on open because we want to modify it. Now, we want to modify it because we want to change this file path directory to be bronze as the top layer, so that's bronze container that's going to hold like any bronze data that you want to bring out of this lake. Under that, we want to define the schema one, so it's sales LT, so bronze sales LT. Then within the sales LT schema, it's going to be the name of the table, so address for instance, and then we want the file name to be address.parquet, so that's the structure that we're after. So to get the schema name and table name, as you'll recall from the first part, source, we can concatenate together within this query. So that will be a good way for us to get the two layers. But also we can get item.schema name and item.table name. Now it's slightly different though for a sync, because within the sync, I want to open it back up, we'll go to parameters, and we want to actually create parameters, which we then pull the value in with. So if we do schema name as one parameter, and the next parameter, we can do table name. Now if we go back to the pipeline here, you'll see we now have these parameters which get utilized for the sync dataset. Now the value of these parameters, we want to add dynamic content, and this here is where we can add in the item dot schema name. We'll copy that, click OK, and for the table name we'll do the same, except we will write in table name. Click OK, and this way we're able to pull those values through. Now if we go back to open, we want to go to connection, we want to update this file path. So for the directory, we'll do a dynamic content, and we're going to update this to concatenate. So at, and then curly braces, concat, so that's the concatenate function, and we're going to add in dataset dot schema name. Whoa. Don't forget the open close brackets. Then I want to add in a / and dataset dot table name. Now dataset here instead of item is because the parameters from the front part, so from the source, they come in as new parameters to the second part, which is sync. And then to get the sync parameters and pull them into here, we have to use dataset. And so if we click OK, that'll concatenate that together. Then if we go to file name, this is where we can then, again, we'll concat and curly braces, open that up. And within here, we're going to concatenate together table name, so dataset dot table name and dot parquet to assign the file type. We'll click OK, and now this will dynamically work for every single one. So now if we come out to the pipeline view, we have the for each activity which copies data, and it's on success of this that the activity runs, but it doesn't say here's the data, so like the item.schema name and item.table name that we require. So we have to explicitly tell the for each which items to loop through. So if we click right in the middle here, that pipeline, and we can see the bottom, we can go to output. We have one here called lookup, which we had run, and there was an in and output. In the output, you can see there is a value item within that JSON object. Now this is the item we want to reference, because otherwise if we just said for each, how would it know what to for each through? So on the for each, we click on that activity, we can go to items. Now I'd previously done this incorrectly, it's not values, it's value, that's why there was a red in the outputs. So if we leave that as dot value and click OK, now we have set up to say on the activity lookup 1, that output get dot value of that JSON object. So let's click on lookup and we'll click debug, and that should run the whole pipeline. Failure happened on source side. Incorrect syntax from sales LT, so we're missing a space. Let's go SQL Server on-prem. I think, could it be on one of the dynamic parts of this activity? So if we click edit, we'll open up this activity, we'll go to source, yes, and so here it says select star from, and there's no space because it's literally just concatenating the strings. You have to add the space in, so I'll add the space, click OK, go back to copy all tables. Now here, so that we can actually monitor it within monitor, let's publish all, which essentially saves it. So if we click publish, that will save and publish everything. And then once those changes are deployed, we will add, there we go, we'll add trigger, and we'll do trigger now, which will just run it right now. Trigger, this is where at the very end I'll show you how we can automate the entire end-to-end process with a new trigger which runs, say, daily or something, or when the SQL database on-prem is updated. But in this instance, let's just trigger it now, click OK, and that will trigger the pipeline. So now we can see this pipeline within monitor. So you can see that that's popped up here by manual trigger. That would say scheduled triggered if it was like scheduled, for instance, and it's in progress. You can always click this refresh button up top to see how it's getting on. If we click on the name, we can then see everything that's happening. So these are all the copy datas which are running concurrently. You can refresh to see how they're getting on, so which ones are in progress, which are queued, for instance. Right, another error. So we have a couple succeeded. Let's preview this here. Output succeeded, so it's not going to say anything bad. This one's failed. Let's see why. Sync side. A lease ID was specified. Interesting error. Let's refresh and see what's happening here. So what we can do anyway here is we can go back to our storage account and we'll refresh this and we'll get to bronze and we'll see what's there. So interestingly, we can see item.schema name, table name, and then that's it. So it's not pulling through the dynamic values. So we'll go back to home, author, pipelines, we'll go to for each activity. So we'll triple check everything here. So it's definitely, it should be activity lookup one output.value. That should be fine. Let's edit the copy data activity. Source, select from all, that should be all good. So yeah, that's fine. On the sync side, let's see here, because I don't know if this is actually what dynamically. So, is that what it is? Yes. So there was no @ symbol. So there we go. Okay. And then we go back. Okay. And that should work now. So we'll publish all there. Publish. Go back to the main pipeline and run there. So what's happening is it requires that. We'll trigger it now. It requires that @ symbol for the dynamic content. So if we go back to monitor, we can then monitor the pipeline again. Click refresh. Copy all tables. We can see that it's here. Now copy data 1, they're all coming up. And as you can see, a couple of them are in progress. Now what we can do now is if we go back to bronze, and we go back to the top layer here, and there you go, sales LT, so you can see it's working now. And you can see what it's doing, it's creating these folders. And then there's the folders here, let's click on one, you can see address.parquet, so it's pulled it over. If we go back out, refresh, more will start coming up as this works. Let's refresh this. And as you can see, it's all working away. And there you go, you can see that they're all there. If we go back here and refresh, we can just see it's ran successfully. We can now see that what we have created is a pipeline which looks up, which accesses a SQL database using a username and password, an on-prem one, gets back a list of table names, and then copies the data of those table names, or copies the data of those tables into an Azure Data Lake here. So there we go. That's the first stage done, which is the ingestion process. So we now have completed this part here until bronze. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it was informative. If you have any comments, questions, queries, leave them below. I like to try and explain things as fully as possible and try not leave anything uncovered, so that's why you see a couple of errors and stuff pop into the tutorial. Next episode we will cover the data transformation using Databricks from bronze to silver and ultimately silver to gold. So make sure you subscribe for that, like and comment, and I will catch you later. Take care.